Hello and welcome back. I'm here with you in the part 2 version of this video in creating your bringing your SVG files into Silhouette Studio 2.9. So we're going to open up our window to bring in the file. With Silhouette Studio, whether you're in 2.9 or in 3.0, you're opening files, you're not importing files. You want to click on your files of type window and choose the SVG. In 2.9 it doesn't recognize PDF files, so that's why we had to go into Inkscape first to do the SVG there. As you can see, it brings in your SVG file that we created in Inkscape, and we have to remember that this is not a freezer paper cut, but this is a fabric cut, so we're going to be adding a seam allowance to this. As also, when you are bringing in SVG files, you do not need to do an auto trace on the parts. You would need to do it if you had brought in a raster type file such as BMP or JPG or PNG. These are all raster type files, and even though PNG doesn't have a background, it's still considered a raster type file. The only files that you could really bring in that you would not have to do this would be from the Silhouette online store, SVG files, and other studio files that you may have purchased on the net. So once you get your SVG into the software, you're then going to click on it so it's selected, and we want to ungroup this file and release the compound path. So we're going to right click and we're going to choose Release Compound Path, and then we will select it again, and you can see it's still moving around. What we're looking for here is for the individual little lines to show up around each shape. So now we're going to choose Ungroup, and sometimes you do have to do this twice, but as you can see, they've now shown up. I'm sorry, I need to just give a little click outside first, and then you can move your shapes around. With this, because it's a fabric cut, we're not going to have enough space on the mat to put all of these shapes in. There's just no way to get a seam allowance on here as well as putting all these shapes to fit on the mat. So what we can do is, when we brought our SVG in, it made a new file. It didn't bring it into this other file that automatically opens whenever you open Silhouette Studio. So we could use this one, or we could come up to New and make a new drawing, and it would give us another Untitled Studio file. Instead, we're just going to move these over to the other file. So we want to highlight these files, and we're going to right click and choose Cut. Then we will come over here and paste in front so that they too will be okay when we are pasting them in. And now, as you can see, these are close enough that we can add a seam allowance to them and not have to worry about them not fitting. The reason you might think, well, there was plenty of room on this file, but there isn't, because if you try to add a seam allowance with the shapes too close together, I will show you what I mean here. I will purposely put these two shapes together, and I will show you what will happen when you have the shapes too close together. You want to go to your offset window, which is going to give you your seam allowance. We're going to highlight our files. We're going to choose offset, and by default mine seems to be the 1/4 inch, and as you can see, it has created the additional line around the shapes. I'm going to choose corner, and then I'm going to choose apply. And what's happened here is this shape has become part of the other shape, and this is not something we want to happen. So we can undo this. You can come up to edit, undo weld. Don't you hate, I hate how they call that weld, but that's what they do. Or we can press Control Z on our keyboard, and that's what I'm going to do. And so I'm just going to move this a little bit out of the way so that I don't have this happen to me again. So we'll select all of these files, we'll choose offset, we'll choose corner, and I will click apply. And this way they do not weld together. Now, when you are dealing with these, you can take your inside shape, which is your original shape, and move it out of the way. And the reason why we're going to do this is because we're also making a freezer paper cut. So we can literally take and put these on another studio file and have our cut ready for the freezer paper. But this is our fabric cut. So now we can move these close together so that they are not going to be welding together at this point. And we can, I'm going to move this up to see if this won't fit in there. I don't even think, with rotating, you just click and hover around the green dot. That's not, I don't think that's going to let us put that in here either. Yes, it's just too close to the edge on the mat. We don't want to take the chance that it won't give a proper cut. So we're just going to move this down into here. And this will put up into here. Okay, so with these other shapes, I'm just going to take and give them a little highlight so that I have them all. I'm going to choose cut, and I'm going to make a new file. Paste in front means that it will paste into the spot that it was prior. Sometimes when you paste, whether it's in Silhouette or in Make the Cut, it will paste in a really teeny tiny position, and that's not what you want. You don't want to lose your size that you already have, because that, I mean, these are applique shapes and they need to stay in the size that was in the PDF file. So we need to remember to be aware of that when it happens. There can come a time where you might have to resize a shape as well, and that's where it's going to be important to know those sizes. But that usually happens when you're working with digitized embroidery files. The only other time I've ever had that happen to me was when I once converted a layout to a marking mat, and I had to resize the shape because I was bringing in 2 PDF files to the same mat. So those are just things you need to be aware of. Okay, so I'm going to quickly rename this with a save so that I don't get confused on what this is. So this is a freezer paper file. I can just put freezer paper dash LT05 -02, that was page 2 of our PDF, and I'm going to put the FP there instead so that I know that this is a freezer paper file. Okay, so this is where it's good. With these, you can mush these right up as close as you want together. You don't want them on the edge of the mat, but you can bring them in as close as possible. And version 3.0 now of Studio, we have what is called a nesting feature. And when you select your files and you choose the nest, it pretty much brings it in as close as it possibly can without welding it together. That's a pretty cool feature. I'm thrilled to give that a try. I just found out about that yesterday when I was watching the new things that are in version 3.0. So I have this set the way I want it. I'll give it another little save, and then I will come back over here. These are our, why is that showing? Oh, okay, well, we have these showing like this. We still need to do these, and we can quickly just make our seam allowance on these. Offset, corner, and I like mine to have little points. I don't know why, I'm just picky like that, I guess. I just don't think it turns as well when you have those ovals on the pointed areas. So that's why I changed to corner, and then I click apply, and that gives us our permanent spot. Now the thing you have to remember here is that these are not grouped together. If you want them, if you don't want to separate the freezer paper from the offset shape, then what you need to do is you need to just come in here and give them a little group so that they will stay together. I do believe there's another thing you can do for that as well. I don't remember what it is at this time. I do apologize. I don't use Silhouette enough to really know what it is. But you do have to group them together so that they won't come apart. And you wouldn't want them to be separate if you're going to leave these two together, because it could throw off your marking. The only reason why I would leave these together is if I was going to mark the fabric first and then cut the seam allowance. That's the only reason why I would do that. Otherwise, I don't see a reason to do it. So you could take this, and you just want to bring these back out. And then you could put these as close together as you want. I don't think that's going to fit on this edge over here. No, it's not. As you can see, it hangs out. So we want to just put that up in here. These are all white pieces of fabric, so I would like them all together so that I can just set a piece of white fabric in here. And what I will do is with other shapes, as I work with those, I will bring them into these studio files as well. Because you can have literally 10 different studio files open, and I'm just throwing that number out there, that you're working on at the same time. And I do that all the time when I'm in Make the Cut. I will just have different tabs open, and I move the shapes back and forth between the tabs to make them work, to make them fit okay. Because I don't want to waste my fabric, I don't want to waste my freezer paper, and so I do what I can to not be so wasteful. Okay, so up here, because these are freezer paper, the only thing you want to be aware of is that with freezer paper, if you're going to use the Reynolds paper, you'll need to cut it 12 by 12 to fit your mat. And when you roll it on, you want it so that the waxy side is up. And you'll want to reverse these shapes, because that's going to affect your shapes when you iron that freezer paper onto the fabric. And these, and my PDF files, are already reversed in the first place. So you'd have to reverse them again so that when you're ironing them on, they will need to be, they will iron on properly, and you can sew them in place properly. The other thing is that other PDF pages might have little embroidery shapes like eyes and that kind of thing. You want to take out whatever you don't need, and that's why I did that in Inkscape. I took them out where I wouldn't need them, because those really are something I would like you to hand embroider or use the machine embroidery technique. And then the other thing is, if you're using freezer paper like C. Jenkins, I don't recommend you use C&Ts because the adherence to the mat. When you use C. Jenkins, or you try the C&T because you might be a little curious to try it, if you put the wax side down on the C. Jenkins, I didn't do it with the wax side down actually. I did it with my wax side on the mat, and the paper was on the top. So the only thing you have to be aware of there is that that is an 8x11 sheet of paper. And so you'll want to come to your page settings window and set your mat to be 8x11. I'm sorry, this is wrong. So as you can see, these parts aren't going to fit on here. Anyway, so we're going to move that hair to another page. That looks like it got cut off or something. Very interesting. And I have the same problem here. No matter what I do, I'm not going to be able to fit these. And there's nothing you can do. I mean, I don't see a way around this. So you would have to move these to another shape, or another studio file. I'm sorry, wrong word. Okay, so I'm going to leave these be for now because I've already made these files. I've already made this block. So those are just things you need to be aware of. The next thing you need to do in the software, it doesn't matter what file or what type of cut you're doing. If you're doing a cutting file, you need to come to the cut window. I'm not aware that you have to do this for marking, but it is, like I say, I have not worked with Silhouette 2.9 for marking files. I've only done it with Silhouette 3.0, and I do believe I still had to make the cut lines. So it's possible that if you were marking your files, you would still have to come here and make your cut line. But you want to highlight all your shapes, okay? And we are only going to cut the edge. If you choose this one, this is where you would have not moved the files, and let's say you wanted to cut inside so that you have a hole inside your freezer paper as well, and you just have that little 1/4 inch piece of the freezer paper. Okay, well, I don't remember where I was. I have a basic idea of where I was. So the cut edge is what we're going to use to do this, but with the other cut, this one here, this is only if you want to come in and cut the inside of the shape as well. So you want to try to keep that in mind. With the marking, you just are going to choose no cut because that's what you're doing. You're not making a cut, but you need to tell the software that you're not making a cut on those shapes. But if you are going to cut the fabric or your freezer paper, you want to choose cut edge. And so even if we had these tiny little keys in here, which we really wouldn't want to have them, just as a precaution, you want to take and make sure that they are not highlighted. But if you did that, then you would have to highlight literally just the shape itself to choose cut edge. You couldn't choose them all and then do cut edge, because then it's going to pick up the little key file inside here. So you just want to make sure that you're getting your outside edges for your shapes. Okay? So once you do that, then you are ready to take it to the cutting window. You want to choose fabric. Well, this one is the freezer paper shape, obviously. You want to choose a paper that seems somewhat thin adhesive thing. So I do remember I used print paper before. So then if this is the marking, we're going to switch to the sketch pen. Okay, and nothing else is needed. You can take it to the cut window and off you go. You should have your mat already set in place with your fabric on the mat or the freezer paper, whichever, and it will start the process when you choose cut. If you're cutting fabric, then you want to choose fabric as your choice here. And you want to make sure you're choosing cotton. If you have something thick like denim or canvas or vinyl, you probably want, even though there's actually a separate one here for vinyl. So you want to be aware of that. Some fabric choices do have their own. But you could come up here to fabric and choose that one. And as you can see, it changed the setting of the knife when you do that. When I cut cottons, for the most part, I am on my knife is on number 4. It doesn't matter what it is here in the software, it's going to tell you 3, but most of the time you need a little bit higher number. But don't make the mistake that many people do. I did it myself. The higher the number, the better the cut you'll get. That is so not true. It only needs the number that is needed for that type of medium. And it's really important to remember that. So if you're having problems with not getting a proper cut on a 3 or a 4 knife setting, it's probably because you didn't starch the fabric enough. It's probably not adhered to the mat really well. There could be all kinds of reasons, but it's probably not the knife setting unless your knife is dull. And it takes a lot for those knives to become dull. The one thing you want to remember with your silhouette is as well, keep a fabric knife and keep a paper knife, and don't intermix the two. If you're cutting freezer paper with your fabric, use your fabric knife. The other thing too is with the knives, the fabric knife that you buy and the plain knife, they are both the same knife. They're just housed in different plastic storage cases so that you can know the difference. That's the only difference between them. There should be no difference in the cost of the price because they are the same knife. Okay, I'm going to leave you with that at this point, and if you have any questions, please feel free to leave me any comments in the YouTube page or on the tutorial page for this tutorial. If you visit the tutorial page and you see this there will be an entire list showing pictures as well as what to do. Thank you so much and have a great day. We'll see you soon.